Hi, and welcome to Dinner Review. I've had a chance to do a lot more cooking recently, and I thought it'd be nice if I could just keep track of what I was doing so that I could learn from what I've done and share with other people. I don't have really any cooking expertise to speak of. I don't use cookbooks. I just improvise mostly, and I make dishes with whatever's available there at the time. One thing I have tried to get a handle on, though, is to be able to do the basics really well. Just the basics of cooking, like how to treat different meats, how to steam vegetables, thicken up a soup, or to make rice or pasta that's just right. Sometimes I mess up, but I am getting better. I've also started to acquire a taste for how to use spices and flavor combinations. Again, mostly just by experimenting. Once you know how to do the basics, though, and you have an idea of what kind of flavors you're aiming for, cooking can really be fun and you can be surprised by what you'll be able to pull off. Tonight I cooked meatloaf for dinner. I had zucchini and squash on the side and a fruit cobbler for dessert. Here are the ingredients in no particular order: baking soda, salt, allspice, brown sugar, powdered ginger, flour, cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, and some brown corn syrup. Next, canned pear halves, a can of apricot filling, can of fruit cocktail, and in the back there is some breadcrumbs, Worcestershire sauce, pitted olive. In front there you see the beef tips, that's beef heart, and I cubed it very finely. Garlic and some fresh rosemary. Of course you're going to need olive oil, salt, and fresh pepper. Nothing can replace fresh ground pepper. Cardamom, agave nectar, or you can use honey, and some Colby Jack cheese. Although you could really just use any soft cheese as long as it isn't aged. Aged cheese does not do well with cooking, like cheddar, for example. It does not cook well. The can of olives again, some water chestnuts, big old jar of whole peeled tomatoes. There's our cardamom, one zucchini and one squash, and that'll do it. Okay, the first dish that I'm going to cover is going to be the vegetables. They were the easiest for me to do, so that's where I'd like to start. Slice up a zucchini and a yellow squash. And the yellow squash should be about the size of the zucchini. Put those in a frying pan, cook those until they're wilted with a little bit of salt, olive oil, and fresh ground pepper. And I really recommend that if you're cooking, that you have salt, fresh ground pepper, and olive oil available for basically every dish. The next thing you want to do is put those aside, and in the same pan you can cook half of an onion, which you're going to dice up, and some water chestnuts, which we'll also dice up to the same size. And they look alike, which is nice, because what you get in the end is you retain the crunchiness even though the onions are cooked because the water chestnuts are there, but you also get the flavor from the onions. I really just wanted to get rid of the water chestnuts. That's a really nice combination to have, and it was kind of a surprising thing that I fell upon. A little bit of salt and some agave nectar helps to bring out the flavor of the onions. And then take, 3 or 4 slices of Colby cheese, crumble it, put the zucchini down first, and then on top of the zucchini, put the Colby cheese. Then on top of that, you're going to put the onions and water chestnuts, and then just put it in the oven or the microwave and warm it up until the cheese melts. And there you have it, zucchini and yellow squash with minced onions and water chestnuts on melted Colby cheese. Alright, next thing we're going to handle is the 2-beef meatloaf. So go ahead and take the 2 beefs, which the first is diced beef hearts, and the second is 2 big handfuls of ground chuck. I know that's a real approximation. Mix that with about a third of the container's worth of breadcrumbs and a can of whole peeled tomatoes. And between the tomatoes and the ground chuck, it's about 50-50. So mix those all together really thoroughly, get it homogeneous, and then go ahead and dice the black olives and add those in too. So that's the base for our meatloaf. The consistency should be pretty wet, but, to your taste. If you want to make it a little drier, go ahead and drain some of the liquid off the tomatoes, but I didn't drain it at all. I just put them in as is. After that, go ahead and add in a liberal amount of cardamom. I guess I'd estimate 2 tablespoons, maybe even a little bit more. It really adds a lot of flavor to the dish, and I think it works really well with the olives. Go ahead and mix that in. Add a little bit of salt and ground pepper. A little bit of diced garlic is always good to bring out some flavor in meats. Even in small amounts, it can really add a lot of pep to a dish. And that's some fresh rosemary. Add those in, stir it up, and take the liquid that you had your olives in and pour that over the diced beef hearts. Also, add some Worcestershire sauce and just leave that to marinate for an hour and a half. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, you also want to add 2 eggs to the meatloaf mixture. Once you've had a chance to let your beef tips marinate, drain off the liquid, mix them all together, and stick them in the oven for, I had it at about 315 for maybe an hour. It's pretty wet, so it's not going to burn. Water's a very forgiving medium. So there you have it. 2 beef cardamom meatloaf. What you need for that is some diced beef hearts, some ground chuck, 2 eggs, a large can of tomatoes, a third of a can of spiced breadcrumbs, pepper, salt, rosemary, garlic, Worcestershire sauce, 1 can of black olives, and lots of cardamom. And the last dish that we have to prepare is the mixed fruit cobbler. And what I did was I made up a dough, put that into a pan, and then put some cobbler on top of it and cooked it. The first thing that I had to do was try to make dough. Now, I have no experience with making breads or doughs. I just got very lucky. I mixed in a bowl 1 egg, flour and brown sugar in equal parts, a little bit of salt and a little bit of baking soda, and then just a drizzle or two of oil on top. And then to add some flavor to it, take a stick of cinnamon and just crush it and put it in the blender with some milk. I added some allspice, some powdered ginger, and a little bit of liquid brown sugar just to sweeten that up, and some cloves. Just a few though, because cloves are powerful and you don't want to use too many. I blended that for a while until it had the color of chocolate milk, and then I mixed that together with the dough. Once that was folded out nicely, I greased up a little pan, put it in there, and then on top of that I put my fruits, which the first thing I put was the apricot filling, and on top of that I put the fruit cocktail, drained of course, because this would be way too wet if I had left all that high fructose corn syrup in, and then on top I put some pear halves, and I sprinkled some cinnamon and allspice between each layer. I baked that basically about the same time as the meatloaf I made, but it was bubbly when I got it out and it wasn't too burnt. So there you have it. Mixed fruit cobbler. And let me go over the ingredients for you one more time. The fruits that I put on top were the pears, fruit cocktail, and apricot filling. And the ingredients for the dough were flour, brown sugar, baking soda, a little bit of salt, an egg, some milk, I used 2%, corn oil, liquid brown sugar, ginger, clove, cinnamon, and allspice. Okay, that just leaves one last thing. Maybe the most important thing. How good was the dinner? Let's take a look. The main dish in this meal was meatloaf, and let me tell you something, it was good. It didn't need any ketchup, it was perfectly seasoned, the cardamom and the olives went really well together, and it was moist. I gotta say, this one was kind of a home run, 9 out of 9 for taste. The presentation, 3 out of 5, it's just a meatloaf after all. Originality, 2 out of 3, nutrition, 2 out of 3. Overall, I give this a 9 out of 10. Next up, the zucchini and squash. I have to say, this one didn't turn out quite as well. The onions and water chestnuts were a really good idea, and I did try to balance the flavors, but you know what? It just had too much going on. 5 out of 9 for taste, presentation 4 out of 5, because it did look good, and originality, I have to say this was a great idea, 3 out of 3. Overall 6 out of 10, and in the end, I would have just dropped the onions and water chestnuts, because zucchini and squash with that cheese would have been great by itself. For dessert, we have the fruit cobbler. It was bubbling over with gooey goodness when I pulled it out of the oven. But of course, there's tons of sugar in it, so I can't give it great rating on nutrition. Still, it tasted pretty good. And that was Dinner Review. Thanks for watching.